And so with that, I will introduce our guests for today. Along with Nancy Wolasnki, the Executive Director of the Alliance for Nonprofit Impact, we'll be joined by Peggy Desjarlais, the Program Officer of Housing and Economic Policy at the United Way of Rhode Island. With a master's degree in public affairs from Brown University and a Bachelor of Arts in political science from Rhode Island College, Peggy has a robust skill set in social service policy, emergency management, community resiliency, and advocacy training, demonstrated through her roles at HealthSource RI, the U.S. Census Bureau, and Witt O'Brien's. She is also on the policy and advocacy team at Rhode Island's Workforce Alliance. And so, without further ado, I will turn it over to Nancy.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for taking time out of your day to join us. We are going to record this so that folks who couldn't join us can also hear. I'm the director of the Alliance for Nonprofit Impact, as most of you know. And what we're going to do today, we're going to go through a number of things happening locally, nationally. I'm going to do an overview, then I actually have to hop off to go present at a different event. But Peggy is going to talk about some of the things happening at the State House and different campaigns that you can get involved with locally. So thank you so much for joining us. Robin just posted in the chat our briefing document, which if you've been on our calls before, has links to things that I am talking about, as well as opportunities to take action on the topics that we're talking about. So without further ado, obviously there is a lot going on in the economic realm right now with tariffs and trade wars and stock market. I'm not going to touch on any of that. This is really focused on policy and litigation, but we know that what is happening in the stock market will affect people broadly, seniors who may not be able to retire or who see their savings being depleted, looking at the endowments of wealthy individuals or philanthropic foundations just took a big hit as well, and not what we need when we want to have them increase their giving. But we know that there's going to be repercussions of this coming to your doorsteps, and so don't want to say that it's not important, but we're going to be focusing on some of the other things that are happening. Wanted to just do a brief shout out that United Way has released its new United is the Way support grants for basic needs nonprofits. So if you are a basic needs nonprofit, particularly if you have been affected by federal budget cuts or by an increase in need because of issues that are happening on the federal level, there is a link on the briefing document for more information about those grants. We are also, as the Alliance, increasing our technical assistance for organizations that have been affected by issues with the federal government or just in general. And so please, if you need assistance or training or technical assistance, please use that link to be able to access that. We have, I just wanted to give a brief example of things that we have available. For instance, we just had a nonprofit come to us and say, we have someone going on maternity leave. We've never had to process leave before. Can you connect us with a human resources person who could help us? A leader, HR leader from Blue Cross just met with them, talked them through the whole process, and gave them what they needed in order to be able to access that and process it. So that's the kind of technical support that we're able to provide. Jess, did you have a question?
Hey, Nancy. Yeah, I just have a quick question. My question is that are you able to get, and I mean, you're part of United Way, but you don't really do the grant part of it. Talk a little bit about like what that grant could kind of like fill in for. I mean, I know that we are, as a behavioral health nonprofit, we are, not having direct cuts to us. Medicaid hasn't been cut, Medicare hasn't been cut, those type of things haven't been cut, but like our ARPA funding for part of our grant got cut. does that count? Like, I'm seeing that there are like Southside Community Land Trust. They lost a whole bunch of funding, but I'm not sure if, Medicaid Medicaid cuts might happen would qualify, if that makes sense. Or ARPA funding would qualify.
Yeah, so like you said, I am not on the the decision-making process, but there is an information session on Friday, and there also are several office hours that are coming up as well. So that, Robin, I don't know if you can put in the link to register for those, because they would be able to answer those specific questions. I also just wanted to recognize that Rhode Island Foundation has also opened up a new fund for organizations affected
Yes,
by the cuts, and also is prioritizing current applications based on that too. So please make sure that you're taking advantage of both. But there are office hours and an information session that should be able to answer your questions. Jess, sorry, I'm not on that committee, so I'm not able to answer that. In terms of litigation right now, Woonasquatucket River Watershed Council, Eastern Conservation District of Rhode Island Childhood-Led Action Project in Rhode Island were lead plaintiffs in a lawsuit that was just heard in federal district court last week. They were partnered together with the National Council of Nonprofits and Democracy Forward, seeking to restore and protect funding, federal funding that was provided through the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act. So that's primarily climate and environment programs, as well as housing programs. So the hearing was last week. We're expecting an initial decision about a temporary restraining order to be released in the next week or so. I was in the courtroom as a non-lawyer in the courtroom. It seemed to me that the judge understood the argument and the rationale for doing a temporary restraining order, but obviously there's no guarantee until you get a actual decision from the court. So appreciate the fact that Rhode Island nonprofits are in that litigation space. We also know that the Rhode Island Latino Arts is involved in litigation with the ACLU against the National Endowment for the Arts because of its prohibition on so-called gender ideology. And they did not receive a temporary restraining order in their case, at least initially. So that is still being litigated about whether that is legal for them to do that, but they did not receive, unfortunately, a temporary restraining order, although the judge seemed to understand the problems with what they were being asked to do, but they did not receive that positive response. The administration released an executive order that basically shut down the Institute for Museum and Library Sciences, and that is now in litigation. So that organization provides funding for local libraries all across the country, as well as museums. And so we do have some of that funding in Rhode Island. So it's a significant issue for them that has been frozen, or they've said that they're eliminating it. The National Endowment for the Humanities has also received funding freezes. I don't know if that one is being litigated yet, but I expect it will be. There is also litigation around the dismantling of the Department of Education, which not only affects public schools, but also affects those of you who may have public service loan forgiveness. That has been thrown into some turmoil as well, because of the idea is that the servicing of those loans will go to the Small Business Administration because they want to essentially shut down the Department of Education. Obviously, the Small Business Administration administers small business loans. They don't administer student loans. And so that don't have the bandwidth basically to take on millions of student loans. So there are lawsuits that are happening around that as well. There's also several civil rights and immigration services organizations are suing to unfreeze Department of Homeland Security funding for refugee and citizenship programming that has also been frozen. Much litigation is still happening. We do not have final decisions on basically anything, but we are seeing things begin to hit the Supreme Court. You may have seen in the news that the Supreme Court has made some temporary decisions based on procedural grounds around some of these things, basically telling lower courts that this wasn't filed in the right place or wasn't filed using the right mechanisms. And so they have not yet really begun to weigh in on the overarching merits of the case, but we are starting to see things progress to the Supreme Court, and they have not yet begun to rule on the actual merits of those cases. One thing that is important for you to know is that on a previous briefing, I talked about the DEI cases, and there was a temporary injunction placed on the federal government so that it was not allowed to seek DEI certifications from grantees. So that was put on hold. The Fourth Circuit Court lifted that injunction. So now the federal government is able to request those certifications. There has not been a final ruling on that case. So there's no final decision, but the temporary restraining order has been lifted. So that means that you may get a request from the federal government to certify your compliance with DEI policy. We are having a legal TA session on DEI certifications on April 23rd. So if you are concerned about that, please make sure to join us for the session on the 23rd, where you will have some actual legal guidance around that and some ways to be thinking about that for you to protect your organization. Any questions about the federal litigation and executive orders? I do just want to note that there have been a lot of concerning things happening around immigration enforcement. We have seen folks that were sent to El Salvador without due process. So far, the Supreme Court has not stopped that. That was one of the cases that was basically sent back to a lower court because of a technicality about how it was filed. There wasn't an actual ruling on the merits of the case, but really concerning that folks are being sent, and in some cases being acknowledged that they were mistakenly sent to the this horrible prison in El Salvador without being given a chance to prove that they are not members of the gang. And in several cases, it's been documented that they were mistakenly sent there, but the federal government is refusing to act to bring them back. Which, if there is not due process for folks who may have questionable immigration status, there's really no due process, because if the federal government says we sent someone to El Salvador without giving them a chance to prove that they're a legal resident or a citizen, then citizens could be picked up and sent as well. So it's a really significant civil rights issue. Where I'm going to talk a little bit about with some General Assembly updates and then go back to federal legislative updates. So in the Rhode Island General Assembly, we have started a advocacy campaign to ask the state government as well as the federal government to protect social services as they develop the fiscal year 26 budget. We know that the state is facing a budget deficit of projected to be about $200 million. And so they are going to be looking everywhere to make cuts, even before anything potentially happens on the federal level with Medicaid. And so we would love to have you share out this link to encourage your staff, your board, supporters, participants to take action. And this will send an email to your state legislators, the leaders of the General Assembly, as well as the congressional delegation, because this is obviously an issue both at the state and federal level. You can send just the templated letter. Even better if you want to craft your own letters to talk about the people who will be impacted by cuts in social services. We really would like to see legislators and the delegation just get bombarded with messages about how important it is to save social services in the fiscal 26 budget. So you can use the link in the chat, or you can use the link that is in the briefing document. The good news is that the audit threshold bill that the Alliance has been championing passed the House at the General Assembly. This would increase the threshold level at which Rhode Island nonprofits are required to have an audit. The current level is $500,000, and it would raise it to $1 million. And that is what the federal level is. So we're really appreciative to our House champion, Representative Caldwell. So if you live in her district, or even if you don't live in her district, if you can send her a thank you, that would be fabulous. In the Senate, our bill is led by Senator Vargas, and it's been referred to Senate Finance Committee. Senate Finance Committee is still doing hearings about state agency budgets, and so they have not scheduled individual bills yet. But the chair of the Finance Committee is one of the sponsors of our bill, so we are optimistic, but still having advocacy around that would be really helpful. We are putting together something on our UJoin platform that you'll be able to do that really quickly and easily. But for right now, you can just email your your senators. We also submitted testimony in support of full funding for RIPTA, because we know how many nonprofit staff and folks that utilize your services depend on a functioning public transportation system. So that is an opportunity for you to weigh in as well. There have been 2 nonprofit disclosure bills introduced in the General Assembly. The House, basically, they were asking for nonprofits to disclose the salaries of the top 10 employees with no threshold, as well as all benefits, including health insurance, rental cars, anything else that is provided as compensation, and also information about where all of your funding comes from. This information would need to be on your website and also submitted to the General Assembly. Most of this information is already available through 990s. So we testified in opposition to the bill on the Senate side. On the House side, the bill was withdrawn by the sponsor before the scheduled hearing. At this point, we are not anticipating that the Senate bill is going to move forward, but we will keep you posted on that. The main difference with the 990 is that 990s require disclosure of salaries above $100,000. So this bill would require disclosure of all salaries, the top 10 salaries. So if you're in a micro nonprofit and you have folks who are making, you have 3 employees and they make minimum wage, those employees would need to have their salaries disclosed by this bill that's been introduced in the General Assembly. So at the moment, we don't think it's going anywhere, but just wanted you to know that that has been introduced. So any questions about the any of those things that I just mentioned at the General Assembly? Okay.
Yeah, oh, Nancy,
Um,
I'm sorry, I
yeah,
have a
go ahead.
question. Sorry.
Yeah.
I know I'm not the only one. So my question is that you just talked about that bill about the disclosing the salaries. Now, I understand that that would be kind of beneficial for those like big businesses as to be like, look how much you're paying, and for Trump to show how much he's paying his people and all of that. But would that have any negative effect on the smaller businesses? Is that
So it's not businesses, it's just nonprofits. And it's
nonprofit? Okay.
nonprofits who want to get funding from the state. So it wouldn't be all nonprofits. It would be
Okay.
nonprofits that want to have state funding. In our thinking, high salaries are already available publicly for
Yeah.
nonprofits. So if you're required to do your 990, you're required to put your high salaries
Right.
in there. The issue is in, so it seems that they're trying to address an issue of high salaries. And so to our way of thinking, that's already addressed by the
990.
990.
Yes.
So it's a duplication to start of that work. It would also for small organizations, it would require the disclosure of low paid workers, which
Okay.
could be a privacy concern for small organizations who have just a very small staff. And so all of their staff would have to have even their low wages disclosed. We took the opportunity to say in the hearing that we appreciate the need for data on nonprofits, but the biggest data issue is actually we need to have more data on the low wages in the sector, because that is impacting recruitment and retention and the ability of the state to provide services, because so many nonprofits are providing services on behalf of the state. We can't recruit and retain people at the salaries that government contracts provide, and that is actually the compensation issue that the state needs to worry about, because if we can't recruit and retain workers, the state doesn't have anywhere else to go to provide those services. And so that we were taking it as an opportunity to really bring up some of the data that we have from our surveys about how poorly compensated so many of our workers are. And so we were trying to change the direction of the discussion.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay, now we're going to switch back to legislation on the federal level. There is a vote tomorrow in the House on the SAVE Act, which would require in-person registration for voting with proof of citizenship documentation. So that means that you could no longer register to vote online. It would mean that nonprofits would no longer be able to do voter registration drives, and would mean that many people would be disenfranchised because they may not be able to go in person if they have a disability or a transportation issue, would not be able to go to a in-person registration. And many people do not have citizenship documents. So they may not have a copy of their birth certificate. They don't have a passport. And so they would be locked out of the opportunity to vote. And so we have spoken out in opposition to the bill. If you would like to tell our congressional delegation who has spoken out against similar bills in the past, there is a link in the document to let them know about your opposition to that. On the federal level, also last weekend, the Senate approved its budget reconciliation package. So now the House needs to take a look at it. In the document, there's an article by the Bipartisan Policy Center about what's in the Senate bill. Basically, the important thing to know is the top line issue. They are allowing an increase to the deficit by $1.25 trillion. They are allowing the debt limit to increase by $5 trillion, and they're calling for $500 billion in new spending. But that new spending is primarily going to defense, and so they are calling for cuts in Medicaid, SNAP, which is food stamps, and the Children's Health Insurance Program, as well as student loans and other financing for higher education. There's a big discrepancy between the Senate bill and the House bill. The Senate bill is doing some what I would think of as fuzzy accounting. Basically, instead of calculating the cost of the overall cost of their bill, they want to calculate the cost as only being what is above what was spent last year. So if the budget was $100 last year, they're saying the only cost to this new bill is anything that's above $100. So we can't balance our checkbooks that way. It's fuzzy accounting that the House doesn't agree with. So there is a lot of inter-Republican discussions that need to happen, but the goal is for the House and the Senate to pass the same budget bill, and it needs to be something that can go through reconciliation. So reconciliation is where you only need a majority of the Senate to pass it instead of needing 60 votes, because they're not going to get Democratic votes to pass this. So they are trying to get an agreement with the House on something that could pass both sides of Congress. The House is asking for $880 billion worth of cuts from the committee that oversees Medicaid and $230 billion related to SNAP. That would be absolutely devastating to our community and to all the people that we serve. So that is why we are encouraging you to send a letter through our system, both to our congressional delegation and to the General Assembly, saying we need to protect these social services. We would also encourage you to reach out to relatives and friends in red states, because they have the power in this budget process that blue states don't have, because there's a majority of in both the House and the Senate of the Republicans, and they're going to be the ones making the decision. So if you can let people know that you know in red states to reach out to their legislators, that would be really helpful. The child tax credit, there is a discussion about including it in the budget. It is looked in different formats, in different proposals. You can send a letter through the United Way system to your the congressional delegation, talking about the importance of the child tax credit. There's a link for that in the document. There's a link to mobilize around the SNAP cuts in the briefing document. We also have asked our delegation to support Bureau of Labor Statistics giving us nonprofit wage and workforce data, which our delegation has been a champion of the last 2 years. It hasn't gotten through, but we are asking them to stand up and do that again. There is a bill in Congress now called the Free Speech Fairness Act. This is basically to weaken the Johnson Amendment. So the Johnson Amendment is what prohibits nonprofits from being active in electoral campaigns. And that amendment is really helpful in strengthening the sector's trust with our communities because we are not political and we need to be nonpartisan. This would erode some of that trust because it would allow nonprofits to be partisan. And so the National Council of Nonprofits and the Alliance are against that. There's also been an executive order by the president to basically pull control of elections overall to the federal government, which is not constitutional, but there's some information on that in the briefing document. The administration is trying to pull back any ARPA funds that have not been obligated. So if you have ARPA funds, please read the information in the briefing document just to make sure that you have maintained your eligibility for the funds that you've received. There is a opportunity to provide comments about public service loan forgiveness and the changes that they're proposing. If you are someone who has received or is in the process of applying for public service loan forgiveness, please use the link in the document to submit comments. They're due by May 5th. We are also going to be providing a number of legal technical assistance sessions coming up in the next month. And so that information is at the end of the briefing document, but Robin will go through all of that at the very end. We still really need information from you about the challenges that you are facing, whether that is based on federal funding or other issues. So we have a few links that you can use to let us know, or you can just email alliance@unitedwayri.org. So please help us know how best to advocate for you and how best to connect you with the resources that we have. We need to know what challenges you're facing. So please let us know either through the online options or just by emailing alliance@unitedwayri.org. So I will see if there's any questions in any of the blitz that I went through, and then I'm going to turn it over to Peggy. Any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Peggy, who is going to share about some of the things that United Way is tracking on the, I think it's mostly on the state level. Feel free to share if there's any federal things that you're tracking as well. But please make sure that you take advantage of all the action items in the briefing document. We will be adding additional things to that document after this because Peggy's going to add some links to some of the things she's going to be talking about. So you are welcome to go ahead and use it right now, but it will have additional items in it when you get it from Robin tomorrow. So thank you so much, and turn it over to you, Peggy.
Thanks so much, Nancy, and the whole Alliance team for making this policy briefing possible. It is super important that we get highly relevant information and guidance so that we can like really move forward as a sector. And part of how I am trying to support that effort is through the like advocacy sort of activations. I dropped a link in the chat, Protect Social Services funding campaign. The first part of that link is the word UJoin. That is just the company that we're using to do this kind of like 3-click advocacy. It's crucial, like Nancy mentioned, to get our names and our letters in the inboxes of our local, state, federal representatives, to make sure that they understand exactly how the policy that they're making, the decisions that they're making are impacting all of our work. In addition to our state senator and state representative, federal senator, federal representative for that specific campaign, the email is also going to go out to the Speaker of the House and the Senate President, and importantly, the finance chairs, Senate Finance Chair and House Finance Chair DePalma and Abney. These are the folks who need to hear from us directly, and as big of a push as we can get, the more the better this does. In support of that argument, we've really been able to use UJoin in this like easy, like kind of one-click measure to activate like existing coalitions like the Workforce Alliance that Robin mentioned way back in my bio, to activate like big groups that are not necessarily like, you don't have like a lot of time to write like a full testimony or to show up or even to really like email your senator or representative. But if you've got, I swear, 15 seconds, you can make a really big impact. We were able to use this at the Workforce Alliance to get the governor's attention for the funding cuts that we saw, the Real Jobs Rhode Island programs going through. A week after, we sent 76 emails to the governor. He, in his like State of the State address, mentioned Real Jobs 6 times. We got funding restored. This kind of like grassroots sort of like e-letter writing campaign, as it were, does move public opinion and political opinion forward, which is why we're pushing for sure. Besides the Fund Social Services campaign, there's something that's a little bit more timely that we're doing that really directly impacts the nonprofit sector. Bill 6066 is up for a hearing tonight in House Labor. This is the additions to the temporary caregiver insurance program. So TCI is Rhode Island's paid family leave, and the updates to this are about including grandparents and siblings as eligible family members, eligible caregivers to receive this benefit. This is a benefit that everybody pays into in terms of like payroll deduction, nonprofits, for-profits, everybody pays into this, and also like increasing the wage reimbursement. It's there's one more part of the bill that I don't spend a lot of time talking about on this part of the UJoin campaign, but is especially relevant to small and medium-sized nonprofits. It's the part of the bill that lets like small like self-employed, like very small businesses kind of opt in to this sort of thing, and make sure that you get that like lower wage workers get the kind of support they need should they become caregivers and need to take time out of work to support their loved ones. It's a like 80,000 people used this program in 2022. That's a lot of Rhode Islanders, but that's not every caregiver. So beefing up this program is going to be really crucial to our communities as we look ahead to potential healthcare funding cuts. It hasn't happened yet, but if there's going to be a reduction in the amount of access that we've all got to healthcare, that's like long-term service or like long-term like residence programs. That's will more Rhode Islanders will need to take time out of work to support their loved ones. So that's being heard today. So if we could send out this email that goes out to all of the members of House Labor, that'd be spectacular. Those are 2 big campaigns that are impacting the nonprofit sector this week. We will have the activation to, or the campaign page to raise the audit threshold ready for when the updates to this meeting go out. The spectacular email that Robin sends out, that'll happen real soon. That is all I've got to say about our like 30-second, like 2-click kind of advocacy campaigns. I'm going to pause for questions, and then I would love to tell this group a little bit about how United Way is going to be doing advocacy trainings moving forward. So I'll pause for questions. Hearing none. So I've been I've taken on United Way's Advocacy 101 trainings since I came onto the team a couple years ago. And because of the movements in the federal administration and some very specific challenges to our state budget, oh my God, thanks, Jess. There's been more of a call for advocacy trainings in for nonprofit staff, boards, constituent services, and like directly impacted communities. Um, Rather than having all of those go into like my solo inbox, United Way is going to be putting applications for that advocacy training program, kind of consolidating like all of those sort of conversations into our grant management software. That doesn't mean that it necessarily comes with a not a subsidy, but a stipend. That also doesn't mean that it comes with any cost. We're still going to be running this for free as part of support for the nonprofit sector. But there will be a link forthcoming to apply for the program just so that we can get them all scheduled. And that's all of those will be scheduled starting in July. That is when because the legislative session ends in June. So my calendar will open way up when it comes to July. I'm really excited at how this is going to allow nonprofits in Rhode Island and serving Rhode Islanders to sort of like centralize a lot of those requests. It'll make a really good case for us to beef up like advocacy programming, and it'll have in like a vision sort of a way. If there's enough folks that are interested in a single subject, because there's like a subject matter question for like the policies that you're specifically interested in, we can be building cohorts, we can be building alliances. This is one of the ways that nonprofits have historically responded to some of the serious challenges that we're facing right now. I am gonna take, oh, Karen's question.
Peggy, your trainings are great. So I just want to make sure I understand this. So because you just did ours, but we want one next year. So in July, we should go ahead and apply for next year.
Absolutely. The application will be out before July. July is just when I'm going to start scheduling them.
Okay. But even if we're not quite sure the date, can we put like the month that we think?
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. The trainings are great, everyone. Have them do, we had like 50 people in our training, or 60.
Oh boy, it was a really
we had
good
60 people.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And it was great.
It was great.
I did with Karen.
Great, great, great.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I need to be able to continue to do those, and so part of like sustaining it as a program means that that we need to like also collect data about what we're doing. We can sell that to the donors, and so that we can keep the training like free and accessible, and also like expand accessibility into things like offering like childcare and food and like translation and interpretation services. This is all part of United Way's mission of like increasing civic engagement in all of our priority populations.
If you need a quote on how great the trainings are, Jess or I will do it.
Thank you, Karen.
We're happy
So
to.
I'm gonna just also say is that I know that there are a lot of different, people from a lot of different organizations here, and you all might be thinking like, how does this integrate? So Peggy, if it's okay with you, like the way that we did it is that Peggy was able to come on, talk about the I guess higher level things. This is how a bill becomes a law. These are your legislators. These are the inner workings of it. And then in a partnership, Karen and I and the other HHP partners then kind of talked more about our specific mental health and behavioral health priorities. So, just because you think, oh, well, I have a priority about this or that, partnering with Peggy, she can make it, customize it to your priorities.
For sure. I can also customize it a lot to those different like audience groups. If you've got a board of directors that is a little bit hesitant about showing up at the State House, or even like like advocating in less like in-person ways. If folks are a little bit nervous, I spend more time talking about the regulations around it. I'm not a lawyer, but I do have like a pretty solid understanding of the rules and regulations as a 501c3, 501c4, where you can advocate and where it's best to contact legal counsel. These are trainings that will be available in person and virtually. These are trainings that will be available in like different like physical locations around the state. We're really hoping to build this out to make sure that it can hit as many Rhode Islanders as possible.
And Peggy, you said the link's coming out in July that we should look for?
Likely before July. It'll come out to members of the Alliance for sure.
Awesome. Great. Count us in.
Thanks a million, Karen. All right. That is all for my part. We talked through UJoin. We teased the the new advocacy training stuff. Are there any other questions that I can take? I know that Nancy has left, but I'm pretty I'm pretty elbow deep in in like some of the federal stuff that's happening too. They've ripped no. All right. In that case, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Robin to close us out.
All right, thank you so much, Peggy. I'm gonna spotlight me. All right, just to close it out, I just want to reiterate the upcoming events that we have with the RI Lawyers Committee of Rhode Island that Nancy mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. And so these will be legal technical assistance sessions over the next 6 weeks for organizations that receive direct federal grants or federal funding through another entity. So sub-awardees are welcome to attend too. And it'll be all accessible through a SurveyMonkey. And so it'll list all the upcoming training sessions, and that's where you can sign up for them. So on April 10th at 11:30, we're doing our first session, which is on the termination of federal grant awards. And that'll just be a session to help organizations be prepared to act and know what your options are in the case one of your grant awards are terminated. On April 23rd, that'll be our session on DEI certifications. And so that'll be providing resources and guidance on what to do if you receive one of those letters. And then May 8th, at 11 o'clock, will be the session on changes in grant conditions. And so under normal circumstances, federal policies can shift rapidly, affecting compliance and funding and operations for organizations. But obviously, it's been accelerated in this environment. So we'll be providing guidelines around that as well. In addition to that, just generally with the Lawyers Committee for Rhode Island, we have set up another portal where Alliance members and also non-Alliance members can request technical assistance. And it doesn't need to be in like direct relation to the executive orders. So we're trying to compile a central place where organizations can ask for help in areas like fundraising, human resources, and strategic planning, but also can help direct people to resources that we have around the executive orders as well. And so that's a SurveyMonkey, and that's also going to be in the briefing document. Other than that, we have our monthly advocacy office hours that are happening at the